Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I'm delighted to welcome back Rachael, who we've had Rachael on the podcast before, and I can't remember which episode it was. It was about a year ago. Can you remember the number?
Oh God, no, I can't. But I think it went out about a year ago. So look back, scroll back a bit.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes. So Rachael was on before to share her recovery story, which was super inspiring and definitely worth a listen. So she's back here today to talk a little bit about what's happened since and what she's now doing for work. And we're going to dive into all of that. So a very warm welcome back to the podcast. It's so nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here and see a friendly face.
Yes. Oh,
and
thanks. So before we kind of dive into, the sort of movement part of this, which is what we're going to be doing a lot of talking about, do you want to say a little bit about yourself and where you are now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So a bit about me in a nutshell. So, I'm a ex-competitive athlete. I used to play tennis competitively growing up, and into my early 20s. I'm also a personal trainer. I'm a mum to a nearly 3-year-old who was born when I had long COVID, when I was at my worst actually, when I was mostly bedbound. And since recovering and regaining my own fitness, I've made it my mission to help people with long COVID and other chronic conditions safely rebuild via my business, Rebound Athletic. And I guess lots happened in a year. I was reflecting on kind of what sort of happened when this week ahead of this call, and both physically but also, and I'll talk a little bit more about in terms of rebound later. But I think like when I share my recovery story, it's recover doesn't always mean symptom-free, and it didn't for me. But when we spoke, I was considering myself recovered. And because I was just returned, I was on a phased return to my work, my corporate job, which is separate to this. I was able to engage more in life. I was able to exercise. I was playing paddle tennis, and despite things that might crop up, so that was kind of like, and I guess also I was at a point where I knew, and I've always said this, and I say this to like my clients, and that if you can recover even a little bit, then full recovery has to be possible. So that's always stayed with me. And so even though like I was still having some symptoms last year, I kind of knew that as time went on, I trusted that I would just keep getting better and better, because that, despite it still not being linear, but that was the trajectory. So physically I'm doing really well. Sort of another indicator of that last year was just how much more consistently I was able to exercise and more intensity, which is like really important to me. If I had like mild sort of flare-ups, normally like the flu-like symptoms that would crop up, I'm sure people are aware of, I was able to kind of like pass through those much more quickly and easily, and not always interfere with my day to day. So physically good, and even now, like since the new year, I build up to Christmas was pretty rough, all the bugs and viruses going around, and still getting quite hit hard by that kind of stuff. But since then, like cognitively, I've kind of feel like I've gone up a notch again, and I'm also training for the Brighton Marathon, which is nuts. But I was training for the London Marathon when I got ill in 2021. So it's always been a goal. And yeah, I remember about this time last year as well, I got really into like meditating and like manifesting type meditations. And this was on there and I kind of forgot about it and I realized, oh yeah, I'm doing it. So, but I was nervous. Like I was nervous actually when I signed up. I was like, should I be doing this still? You know, doubts started creeping in. Like, am I ready for this? Is this one step too far? But what's been really nice is that every time I do a run, then I'm okay and I recover well. It's just giving me more and more confidence and that, you know, in my body and trust in my body. So yeah, physically things are going great.
Yeah, I think for me it was, yeah, it was building that confidence alongside the sort of fitness, I suppose.
Mm,
And when you're still unwell, it's very difficult to think about it in terms of fitness because it's so inconsistent and you're worried, you don't want to overdo it because you know what the cost of that is. And then for me it was when I was recovered, it wasn't that I was fully fit in the way that I was before, it was that I was able to push myself to become
mm,
that. And with that there became a lot of yeah, confidence building. And if I went for a run, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm dying. No, it's because I'm really unfit and I need to peg it back to like, I haven't run for however many years. So it was kind of building a lot of that confidence as well in your body and, allowing yourself to really enjoy having that ability to do it again, I think for me. So I'm so glad that you seem to have had a sort of similar experience and a marathon, that's quite epic.
yeah, yeah, it is. And no, I totally agree like that. Yeah, the confidence thing's huge.
Mm.
And yeah, it is epic, but it's also my little sort of F you to COVID and long
I love
COVID.
it. I love it.
Um,
So how's the business going?
yeah, it's good, it's good. Um, yeah, so when we last spoke, just over a year ago now, I just, maybe a couple of months before that, had launched Rebound Athletic. And what the business at that point really was centered around was a reconditioning program called the 90-day Rebound Method, which I'd created for myself initially when I was back in 2022, a year into my illness. I just had a shift change in my condition. I was starting to improve very slowly, and I sort of thought, okay, cool. When I get better, which wasn't then, and when I'm able to train, I need a reconditioning program that is suitable for someone coming out of a chronic illness. That but it isn't a big for a beginner because I don't want to train like a beginner. So I basically designed my ideal program that kept me really excited and looking forward to that day, whenever that might be. And so that's where the business started. And I decided I can sort of make this available to other people, and had some really good like success stories through that. And also it started there because it was a bit of self-preservation, if I'm honest. I was still recovering. It's that program specifically is tailored for people more at the tail end of recovery. They've already built back some exercise tolerance and not experiencing impairment. The stage of recovery I was at that point, I went through this phase. I know other people do it as well, like just trying to remove myself from the word long COVID, anything associated, any forums, etc. And that was kind of where I was at, and it was part of my journey. So yeah, but then like as last year started to progress and my capacity grew, my mental resilience, my confidence in physically and everywhere where I was at, I was working more. Things just started to shift again, and I kind of thought like, how do I help more people? Like I know I can help more people, and not I felt like it was my duty, but I just was like, I've got something here. And it so when I'd also prior to that had designed my own suitable recovery program based on my experiences, bad experiences with things like graded exercise therapy, based on my obviously first-hand experience of long COVID and the nuances around it, and PEM and exercise intolerance, etc. So I I kind of developed something. I did it myself, and actually, it got me back safely to the point where I could exercise more intensely, but without ever trigger impairment, overexerting myself. So I was like, but the problem we've got is that how do you make something really? How do you give people like absolute clarity on how to achieve that? Right? It's so complex. It's from one day to the next, you could be doing the same movement and it's fine, and then next it sends you into a crash. Like, how do you navigate all that and make it really clear to people how you do that? That was kind of like my starting point, and in my corporate role, I'm a AI product manager, which means I day to day are solving complex customer business problems and have to like often using data and research and things, but often having to like try to make the complex really simple for people to understand. And we do that using various frameworks and things. So towards the end of last summer, I basically designed something called the baseline formula, which contains all the principles to follow to ensure that you can exercise consistently no matter where you are in your recovery, that won't overexert you and push you into a crash or exacerbate symptoms, essentially. But I guess, and I'm gonna, in this chat today, I'm going to dive into each component of that, because I really want to be able to provide like practical and like immediately actionable advice that you can take away today. You can grab a pen now, I'd say, so you can take notes. But I'm literally giving away like this method, this formula, because like to try and make it really simple for you, for people listening to understand that maybe wondering, how do I navigate my symptoms of exercise? I know exercise is important, but that there's so many benefits to it. But how do you get those when you're constantly battling symptoms and exercise intolerance?
Yeah, and we talk about how everybody is so individual, because that's true, they are. Everyone's symptoms, everyone's experience, everyone's how they respond to certain things is so different. And yet, despite all of the differences, you've developed a protocol that you think would work for everybody. We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us.
Yeah, exactly. Within that, I don't want to talk too much about the membership here. People want to find out more information. I'm sure you'll drop the information in the notes. But yeah, like the proof's in the pudding, and I've got I think about 30 members inside the club at the moment, all at different stages of recovery. Some with CFS, purely, some mostly with long COVID, but obviously CFS presenting symptoms. And so I would say that generally, if someone comes to me and they are still predominantly complete, bedbound, and they've got really, really low capacity, they're welcome to join, and we adapt the program to suit that need. But I generally, at that point, would say focus on things like breath work, focus on things like yoga, other forms of even more gentle movement, because I'm probably just going to give you certain parts of the workouts which are like going to be like maybe just the gentle mobility, like some windshield wipers from your bed, or some bum squeezes or something like that, which you perhaps don't need a full program. I shouldn't be saying this. We probably don't need to invest at that point, because it's kind of obvious stuff and you might already be doing it. But at the same time, there's also benefit of being part of the community. There's also benefit in terms of having me in your pocket to talk to lean on, to find out, to know when the right time is to do a little bit more. So it's really, it's absolutely available to anyone, any stage of recovery. We adapt it to people's different stages. But I would say to get the most value out, you probably want to have a little bit more capacity where you're not solely bedbound, would be my advice. And if you are, the main focus is rest, and other forms of gentle movement should be your focus.
Yeah, so it is adaptable. And I think, maybe this is taking us into where we're going to talk a bit more specifically about some of these things. Because adaptable, I think, is such an important word
Yeah,
because
it is.
everybody is different. They are going to respond differently to different things, but they also have different preferences, don't they? If you talk about, what sort of sports do you like doing? Well, you
Mm,
play tennis. I like hill walking.
mm,
I go swimming in Loch Ness. Like a lot of people, that doesn't work for them. So everybody is going to want to do slightly different things. And obviously putting that back into a sort of long COVID and CFS context, it might be
yeah.
kind of like, lifting your arms versus lifting your legs. But, it's going to work differently for different people, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've got people, it's different, like you say, different people, different goals and different things they did previously.
Mm.
I've got a guy whose goal has been to get back to foiling, foil surfing, I think it's called. Like that's his thing he loves. I've got other people that maybe did more yoga and Pilates before they got ill. Other people that I did CrossFit. But what's really great about this protocol that I developed is that it's a way to build back capacity and endurance in your muscles that will then enable you to do those things, whatever that might be, that getting back to what you love. So, but yeah, like talking about like adaptability, like that's essential. And anyone that's experienced things like great exercise therapy or perhaps tried just more typical exercise programs throughout their recovery and had bad experiences is probably largely part in part to that lack of adaptability. Um, and yeah, like my experience with graded exercise therapy is one of the reasons that led me to creating my own thing. Um, and what's interesting about graded exercise therapy is there's been a lot of talk about it obviously the last few years. Um, I think those experienced anecdotally know why it's probably not appropriate for most stages of recovery. I think there probably is a place for it, but like way down the track when you've already got, your capacity's already increased, you're not struggling with exercise intolerance, then it's probably is quite a useful rehabilitation tool. And how it's applied normally, it's there's so many conditions and illnesses that graded exercise therapy is used for. It's not just specific to ME, CFS, or long COVID, right? It's used for like injury rehabilitation or post surgeries or cancer rehabilitation. Like those things they're much more tangible, first of all, much more well known. The diagnoses of those things are much more well known. The treatment plans are much more known. The potential path forward is much more well known. And with chronic illnesses like long COVID, like chronic fatigue syndrome, they're not. And so it's not, that one size fits all doesn't work. And in fact, you might have seen recently, there's the Cochrane we're meant to be doing a review of graded exercise therapy for ME/CFS. The last review they did was back in 2020. And so Cochrane are like a body that do reviews of research in healthcare and health policy. And they did a review on graded exercise therapy back in 2020, which at the time they said they found that it was still suitable. And obviously, there's been a lot of noise around that since, and subsequent studies and articles have reviewed this and found that original review was flawed. There was apparently poor control groups. There was evidence of harm was ignored. They were using fatigue as like an outcome, but obviously that's unreliable when fatigue is fluctuating and then subsequent research has found that actually graded exercise therapy is harmful for more than 50% of participants with CFS, ME/CFS. And then also the NICE guidelines, so the British National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, they've also done extensive review of all the literature around this, and they've also found that graded exercise therapy is harmful and should not be used. So what I haven't seen, certainly from my own sort of just reading and what I haven't seen is any kind of study that drills down into the why. Like, I think those who experience it probably know why it's not suitable, but we've not had any sort of research to back that up. But in terms of like how it's applied, the movement modalities that's used, like what is it that makes it's harmful essentially. And I think, and this is a hypothesis, obviously, what I'm going to say, but there's also been a lot of research the last few years about mitochondrial dysfunction in people with long COVID and people with ME/CFS, and they've now found that a clear link. So you could hypothesize that, and they've linked that to exercise intolerance as well. So if you link the two together, then there's sort of maybe an obvious reason there too why graded exercise therapy is not suitable, because it is still graded, essentially. And I always tell, just to finish on talk about graded, because I could bang on about it for ages and why, but I don't want to trigger too many people. But I've told this story before. I might have even told it last time I was on. I can't remember. But the one thing that always sticks in my mind when I experienced it was going from, I was bedbound. I was predominantly bedbound at this point. I was having to bed rest a lot when I was doing this program. But it was at a time when I didn't know. It was early on. We didn't know much about the condition. I didn't know much about PEM, etc., and what I know now. But I just had, there's people trying to help me. Fantastic. There's not many people trying to help. Let's jump into this. So yeah, I was part of a program for fatigue management and sort of movement therapy, which essentially was a take on graded exercise therapy. And I was just been in my bed resting, and to get to the class, I had to get into a taxi to get there. And then when we got there, because it was on the program that week, but not because of what I needed, we were in a studio, and I was doing things like walking lunges and skipping and jogging across the room. And I'm thinking, what the, like, I know what's going to happen after this, and I've just been in bed. So yeah, I can laugh at it now. I probably laugh more about it now than I did a year ago and a year before that. But this is kind of all the stuff. These are my experiences and what my other stories that people told me. It's kind of why I was so, I guess, passionate about designing the protocol that I did, and then now making that available to people.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, because it's such a difficult thing, isn't it? We do want to increase capacity because that is the path out. I mean, again, I think your trajectory is probably similar. You became unwell and suddenly you reduced what you did, and you go down and down and down and down and down to, wherever you get to. And then that's kind of where you do the work, isn't it? You find the things that help you, whether it's breathing or nutrition or whatever that is, maybe some drugs, maybe whatever, legal drugs, whatever that is that you find there, you find the things that help you, and then that's where you then need to think about, okay, how can I safely increase my activity again? And, maybe that's where, some people come across graded exercise and it doesn't work because it's too much too soon, or it's
Yeah.
too prescriptive or whatever. But I think maybe where the difficulty in people's understanding comes is, yes, we want to increase, but no, we don't want to do it in a graded prescriptive way. So how
Yeah.
do we do that in a way that is safe for us, given that we are all individual and very different, and there's no like one way of doing it? Well, I suppose that brings us on to the next thing we're going to talk about, isn't it? What's the
Yeah.
formula? How do we do it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to pick up on a point you said there, because I think, yeah, movement is normally medicine, right? We know that for a lot of people,
Mm,
but not if it's prescribed wrongly. It can have the opposite effect. And, it does, it's medicine because we know that it increases your blood flow and therefore oxygen to your cells. It makes your heart work more efficiently, by pumping more blood per beat. We know that it is also what helps you to heal your mitochondria and create new mitochondria. Your powerhouse of your cells, your energy producing power of your cells. It's for a process called biogenesis. It's like living cells create new cells. Like there's research for days, years, whatever. Like we know all this stuff, right? But it's a chicken and egg when like you say, when you're dealing with something like on COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome. How do you do that? How do you achieve those benefits when it is impossible for you to move consistently, and you need to be able to move consistently to be able to achieve those benefits? So yeah, it does bring us nicely onto the baseline formula. So there are essentially three core components of it, and it's about the correct movement modality at the correct dosage or volume, and then something that I call predictable progressions. And you add those all together, and that's how you achieve your baseline or that consistency. So then they be able to then move that forward. But before we get to that, I have this formula as part of the video. It's a video course within in the membership, but the first lesson in that is actually around mindset because you can ignore all of that if you don't get this mindset shift right, and it's essential. Then your chance of success is a lot less. So the mindset shift we start with is one of consistency over progression, and that might sound counterintuitive, being shifting that focus to consistency, but it is what will eventually mean progression. And it's really hard, I think, especially for those like me and a lot of people that are pre-programmed to just go harder, faster, stronger, heavier, whatever. And often I find myself being that person that reins other people in now. Like I wish I had someone like that, because it often does take a third party. But if you can grasp this principle, this mindset shift, it just sets you up for success, because it means that things like on your good days, instead of doing more, you'll do the same, right? And you will avoid mistakes like making progressions too quickly or by too much. And essentially, it's what's going to prevent you from overexerting into a crash, because consistency ultimately equates to find the amount of movement, no matter how small, that you can repeat. And even if you feel like you can do more. So that's why it's the first lesson before we get into the formula. And this consistency of first approach will allow your body to then, if you get it right, will allow your body to make adaptations so that you can build tolerance. It will allow you to gauge better where you're at and when the right time is to be able to make a small progression, because you're not constantly like shocking yourself, so you're able to see how clearly you are responding. So that's where we start, first of all. And then the first component of the baseline formula is around the movement modality itself. So the correct or the movement modality that we use is, I call it muscle activation. We're talking about deliberate strength movement here predominantly, I should say. We do top and tail the workouts with mobility and gentle, longer held sort of yin yoga style stretches. But essentially what we're talking about, when I talk about the movement modalities, I'm talking about strength exercises, but the right type. And I call them muscle activation, but they're also known as isolation exercises. And these are typically used in like injury rehab. You'll even find them in traditional strength warm-ups that prepare the body for load. But they're also ideal for fatigue-related conditions for a number of reasons. As the name suggests, they target a single muscle group or single muscle. And then so by nature, they are smaller controlled movements and therefore require less energy to perform. So when we think back to like what we know about mitochondrial dysfunction, we can maybe start to see why actually this kind of movement might make sense, because we're implementing the most energy efficient movements, strength movements possible, right? We're giving yourself the best chance of improving strength without excessive strain. And then the other good things about it is that they target, a lot of isolation exercises are what target stabilizing muscles. So great for injury prevention. When we've been immobile for a long time, we're deconditioned. Focusing on things like hip flexors, which stabilize the lower back. They play a key role in walking. They improve your posture, your joint ability. Your core is a stabilizing muscle. We focus on scapular muscles like your rhomboids. Again, great for posture. And this is all important because when you do progress and you do recover enough to maybe do more exercise, maybe more aerobic exercise, or back to sport, or even just more intense, strength training, then hopefully you've kind of built back a level of foundations that will, de-risk your chance of injury when you do that. And then they're often they are low impact as well. And there's so many options with isolation exercises to perform them on a mat, perform them horizontally. Obviously, that's really important for energy conserving as well, but also for managing POTS, which a lot of people have. And just to in case anyone doesn't help me further what an isolation exercise is. So to give you an example, a squat is what we call a compound movement because it uses multiple muscle groups to perform, right? A lot of energy required to perform a squat or a press up or something like that, or a lunge. Whereas an isolation might be like a clam, which targets your glute med predominantly, and as you can imagine, less energy to perform. So yeah, it's about the number one is the correct movement modality, and the last thing to say on these type of exercises is that it really encourages it's more mindful, like those slow, low impact controlled movements. It just helps to foster a greater I think mind body connection than more intense modalities. Like the most important thing here, obviously, is the energy efficiency, but also just another byproduct of it, how it really helps you to get tuned in, tuned into your body, and really tuning into almost every part of the movement as well is something I encourage. And it starts to create this sense of safety and trust in your body and what you're doing. And that is so important, as you know, for people that, might have a lot of fear and anxiety around movement. So that's the first component. The second component is about dosage or volume, if you like. And there's basically three principles around this. The first one is more of a question that people can ask themselves, and it's, can I perform this amount of movement day after day without causing my symptoms to worsen? And that's not to say you would repeat it daily, because rest is important, but if you had to, could you? And that is such an important question to kind of start with. And it's it becomes this handbrake metric. We don't want this to get worse. So when we come on to progressions, and which I'll talk about in a second, which is the third part, we always come back to this question. And it's just a really important helpful steer. So that's the first principle around doses. The second one is, and you would have heard, I'm sure people have heard this before, but it's doing less than you think, right? And I say doing less than you think you should do, that you want to do, or even that you feel you can do. It's so important. And I think that's where, again, more known approaches to rehabilitation, great exercise therapy, just, don't allow for this type of flexibility, right? It's kind of, you do this because the program says you do this, but actually, and, actually you need to be doing a lot less than you think in order to achieve consistency, because that's the goal. That's what we're aiming for here. That's how you're going to then eventually build that exercise tolerance, by being able to move consistently. So no matter how small that volume is. And then the last one is around effort. It's like an effort gauge. It's it should always feel easy. Whatever you're doing at this stage should always feel easy. And if you're straining, if you're sweating, if you're huffing and puffing, means those are signs that you're doing too much. And the good thing is that as you rebuild capacity, the amount of movement that feels easy increases naturally, and that's a really good indicator of your progress. And yeah, it's not completely one size fits all. And this obviously throughout different stages of recovery, yeah, we can look at the effort a bit more, but just in terms of helpful kind of guide for now, it's following these principles is a really, really good starting point.
And what's really interesting is, this goes against what we are told from childhood, or certainly what a lot of us have been told from childhood, is that you need to be on max capacity all the time. If you are not pushing yourself and doing all of the stuff, then you're being lazy. You're not, you're not putting your back into it, all of this. And I genuinely believed all of this. And it's such a change now where I'm now like, I could go and run that 10 miles, but actually, I don't really feel like doing that today. I think I might just go for a walk instead.
Mm,
It's
mm,
sunny outside, and it's like just because you can doesn't mean that you actually want to, let alone should. And
yeah.
coming back to what you were saying about consistency, I think that is important. I say that in breathing classes, it's that consistency that's going to pay off. You don't, coming back to my previous life as a music teacher, the child that comes into their cello lesson and you say, have you practiced this week? How many times have you practiced? And you can tell straight away when they're lying. The person that did consistent practice all week versus the person that the night before went, oh no, I've got a lesson in the morning, I'd better do a load of practice. Like, it is blatantly obvious who is putting in the consistent effort and who's
Mm,
doing the like panic practice the night before, even if the
mm,
amount of minutes spent might be the same. And it sounds
yeah.
like kind of similar to what you're saying here, doing that consistently rather than one big one and then crashing for a week.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good analogy to use, but it's
yeah.
exactly that. And it's just having these useful sort of checkpoints, I think,
Mm.
you know, to hold yourself accountable, I guess. Um, so yeah, so you start with the right type of deliberate strengthening, which is the isolation exercises or muscle activation, and then you combine that with the right amount that you can then perform repeatedly, and that's your baseline. And when inside the membership road teacher stuff, I help people further in terms of making sure we start you at that is the right point for you. So then once you've got that, the question then becomes like, how do you move that baseline safely forward? How do you gradually increase your exercise tolerance? Because that's what we want to do, right? We want to progress, but as I said earlier, it's about consistency over progression. But yes, that's how we get there, but we still obviously want to progress. And we do that with what I call predictable progressions, right? We need to be able to know confidently that when you do make a progression, you're going to know what's going to happen, right? In a positive way, not that you can sustain it. You're not going, it's not risky, like it's not, roll the dice type thing, which way this is going to go. Um, so when we think about progression in a normal program, straight program, people will probably be familiar with something called progressive overload, and that looks like usually some kind of adjustment weekly, whether that be load or volume or reducing rest or increasing time under tension, which these things like work really well for a healthy body that can recover and adapt more quickly. They don't work so well in for people with chronic illnesses, particularly fatigue presenting ones. So how do we do that in a safe and predictable way? So there's three things within this component, and the first one is about time. So time between your baselines or time between your progressions. So rather than that being predetermined, you need to stay at an amount of movement or your baseline for as long as it takes you to build confidence in what you are tolerating. All right. And no matter how low that volume is, but it doesn't matter if that is 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, but that flexibility on time and that loose definition time is so important because it gives you space to know eventually when you'll just intuitively know when the right time is to make a little progression at that point. And it's totally okay to be comfortable staying there as long as you want. I remember when I was doing this program a couple of years ago, like I've stayed at a certain level for about 6 weeks, even though I knew I could do more and I was ready to do more. But you know what? I was just so happy to be able to do something consistently at that level without and just being content at that and safe in the knowledge and confident in what I was tolerating. And I was just happy being there for longer. And I've had people in the membership feel that way too. And so I won't push them up. We just wait until they intuitively know that they're ready for a little bit more or want to do a little bit more. So that loose definition time is super important. Then the next one is when you are ready to make that move. It's about to the next baseline. It's about what I call micro progressions. So there's really incremental increases in either volume or intensity, or maybe we might add another exercise in there. But as I said earlier, when we make the decision, we think about that handbrake metric. We ask that question again: can I perform this movement consistently, repeatedly, if I need it, if I wanted to, if I needed to? And if there's any doubt, we just stay where we are a little bit longer, and that's totally cool. And then lastly, it's about flexibility. So we're not just about being flexible in time as the first one, but also flexibility in terms of giving yourself permission to scale back if you need to. We know recovery is not linear, so therefore your movement is not linear either. You need to be able to accept and give yourself permission to scale back. You're not going backwards, but you need to do that to go forwards again. And you need to work with your symptoms and work with your fluctuating conditions. So that might mean, you're just rested if you need to at some point, or it might mean that, and we this is where the sort of coach support comes in, because we talk about it. It might mean that you need to just do the mobility and the stretches today or this week. That's what feels comfortable for you or right for you this week, and then we just reassess. So that flexibility is just so important, because it still feels like that if we can find something that you're still able to do, so you still maintain that consistency. Then you're not going backwards, and it also just mentally really helps as well, I think, in that respect. So that's the baseline for it. Those are the components that make it up, essentially.
We'll be right back. Hey there, I'm just jumping in for a second to see if you're enjoying this episode. If you're finding it useful, maybe you would consider sharing it somewhere, a friend, a group, or even on your Twitter feed. If everyone was able to share just once, we'd be able to get this information out to even more people who really, really need it. So please consider sharing somewhere if you possibly can. I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you so much. Yeah, and I like that kind of giving yourself permission, because, I think I said a moment ago, we do feel that, societal need to push. And holding ourselves back, even though we know we need to, is often very, very difficult. So it's kind of giving ourselves that permission and it being under our control that I think has a lot of power, doesn't it? And it also brings in, we talk about, the different stressors that impact us. And, with long COVID and ME/CFS, obviously we learn this lesson an awful lot harder than a, regular, healthy, regulated person. That argument with your partner, instead of making you pissed off for an hour, it can put you in bed for a week. That overexertion, if you do too much too quickly, it can send you into that immobilization and you're stuck there for ages. So it's this, it's very much more, what am I trying to say? It's bigger, isn't it? Or more impactful. And we also learn about the different things. So if someone had started to go back to work at the same time as doing this formula, for example, they might find that the extra load from that means that they maybe need to take a step back on the formula. And that is not that they're going backwards, it's that they're getting that load from elsewhere, isn't it? And all of these things add together. And if you increase one thing, it's going to impact other things. And also that a normal, I hate the word normal, but a regular person would also notice that.
Yeah.
But to less of an extent, probably, or they would, ignore it more, maybe.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. And we do, everyone, does have other stuff going on. And often one of the questions I get asked from new members is, "Hey, I'm managing to walk, daily or a few times a week. Like, I want to keep doing that. I don't want to stop that. Can I keep doing that alongside this?" I'm like, absolutely. The idea is that whatever you come in at, let's say, call it that baseline, we don't want to, whatever we add to in terms of deliberate movement program, is to not take away from anything else you're doing, whether that's work, whether it's walking, whether it's, socializing, whatever. Like, that's the aim. So we decide what that starting volume is for you, so that it doesn't interfere or prevent you from doing the other stuff or the other progress you've made and other aspects of your recovery in your life. So yeah, it's a really, really important point.
Yeah. And it comes back to, doesn't it, what is important for each individual person? For some people, getting some of that, sort of capability and capacity back may be the
Mm.
most important thing in terms of sort of being able to do movement and some
Yeah,
exercise. Whereas for some people, it may be more important that they're able to start going back to work or, whatever it
yeah.
is for them. And it sounds like you have the ability to tailor this to each individual person depending on whatever it is that their
Yeah.
stuff is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple of members recently who've moved house, and that's huge. That
Mm,
is, I did it actually twice during my recovery, different 1 year apart, but like it really, and like you say, for anyone, that's knackering. Um, so it's really that we have to take that into massive consideration, and we scale right back. Um, because that's that focus. It's not forever. Obviously, you might take up a few weeks or whatever, a month maybe to kind of then get back to a sort of a equilibrium a little bit before you're ready to go again. But it's being adaptable, like you say.
yeah, absolutely. And it sounds from what you're saying that people that you have had doing this formula with you have really seen the benefits from it, from working with someone who's designed something from the inside, knowing what it's like.
Yeah, and I think I do hear when people feedback, whether formally or informally, that trust is, I think, so powerful for people, and that's why I always urge anyone going for something like this to, and I don't, whether it's me or anyone else, but choosing someone that, if you want to incorporate movement and you want help with that, trying to choose someone that's been through it, or whatever else, whether it's breath work, like, I know you have your breath course, do it with someone that gets your condition ideally firsthand, because it is different and there are different considerations, and it just, even just that knowing that you don't have to explain to that person what you're going through, they just get it. Look, first of all, women over index we know on long COVID, chronic illness, CFS, unfortunately, especially between the sort of 40 to 55 age bracket, those perimenopausal, menopausal. So, but I do have a few guys in the group as well, and Jason, actually, his story's a little bit different, and he always feels bad saying it because he was probably, you'd say, like, not as ill as everyone else. He had sort of CFS like symptoms, like more like boom and bust, and he had a COVID infection earlier last year, which kind of sent him into a big crash. So he kind of gets it, but his journey is a little bit different, and his challenge was like, he's a business owner. He was kind of going through a lot of burnout prior to that, and that's probably where it all started from. And he would always just push through fatigue, and whether that was with work or with exercise. And what he said is just kind of like, he learned through this program to just sort of give himself the space and the rest that he needed and the right pacing to be able to kind of like manage that, not push through, and manage and learn how not to do that. But then, so to the point where he could get his exercise capacity back up. And so, I'm really grateful that he trusted the process, because a lot of guys come in, and not a lot of guys, sorry, I don't probably get as many guys as well, because I think, and this is going to sound really mean, but like, you know, even more so, guys are probably pre-programmed to go heavy and, go strong. And I think this approach, this really sort of gentle approach, is maybe like not what they want to do, but unfortunately is a means to an end. And so it's great when guys like Jason come in and get that and trust it. And, he's achieved his goals. He's just got back to the floor surfing, and he also rolled on to the 90-day rebound method after that. So he's just going from strength to strength. But then you've got someone like, we think, like Paula, who is over 4 years now into long COVID. And sort of her biggest challenge, I think, which all of us can probably relate to, is that in her good bits of her recovery, she would get really overexcited and do too much. And she also struggles with the persistent sort of heavy leg pain as well, which makes walking hard for her. So, but since she was one of our first members, and she's managed, through this sort of deliberate general strength work, she's created this level of consistency that she's been able to maintain. She's getting a confidence back, which has just been huge for her. She went to Ibiza a couple of months ago and was dancing, and like just like stuff she would never imagined, before. So it's just amazing, actually. It's like the most rewarding thing in the world to be able to help people get some of their life back. So
yeah, I agree. And I think, it's so positive to hear that, you know, it does, you are going to get there. It's just a long and, painful process. But, that it is that kind of persistence, consistency, keeping going, as you said, trusting the process, putting the effort in, but the right sort of effort at the right time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for coming along and sharing so many valuable tips. I will make sure to put your website into the show notes. So if anybody wants to see any of your YouTube videos or learn more about working with you, they can look that up and find all that information. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, it's been lovely chatting again.
No problem. Thanks for having me, and I really hope that this has been useful for those listening, and that someone, that people can take at least one thing away from it that will help them.
Thank you so much to all of my guests and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.